Colonel, step away from the formation. Your credentials are not required here. The command cut through the morning air at Camp Lejeune, stopping the advance of Sergeant Elise Vance. Every soldier in the unit froze, but before the colonel could speak again, a low growl echoed from the K9 line. Then another. Within seconds, every military working dog on the parade ground broke formation and positioned itself protectively around the dismissed female handler. This was Sergeant Elise Vance, a Marine K9 handler with 7 years working military working dogs. She lived by the one dog, one handler creed, a bond of absolute trust forged in war zones from Iraq to Afghanistan. But to Colonel Richard Briggs, she was just another junior Marine in his formation, her expertise invisible behind her rank. His order was meant to humiliate, to reinforce the chain of command. He never considered that in the world of K9 units, a different hierarchy exists, one built on respect earned in blood and mud. And in that moment, every dog on the field chose to answer to it. To understand why that moment was impossible, you need to know 2 stories. The first is the story of the Military Working Dog, or MWD, program itself. For decades, it was an exclusive brotherhood. Women were formally added to the program in 1974. The first class, including women, was held in early 1975. They faced immediate, tangible obstacles. The first female handlers were issued dress blues and low quarter shoes for cleaning kennels. They had to formally request fatigues and combat boots. This was the environment. The tradition was built in. The second story is that of Sergeant Elise Vance. She enlisted at 19, scoring a 96 on the technical portion of her entry exam. She aced the rigorous screening for military working dog handler, MOS 31 Kilo. This involved 10 weeks of basic combat training followed by 18 weeks of advanced individual training in dog handling, safety, grooming, building search, tracking, and controlled aggression. She graduated top of her class. Her first partner was a Belgian Malinois named Rex. Under the military's one dog, one handler policy, they were bonded for life. Their first deployment was to Iraq. In the chaos of an IED attack outside Fallujah, Rex located 2 Marines trapped in a wrecked vehicle. Vance directed the rescue under direct fire. She received an Army Commendation Medal with Valor. Rex received a Paw Print Medal. Neither of them cared about the awards. The bond was the reward. But here's where the tension starts. While Vance was building that unbreakable trust in dust and danger, Colonel Richard Briggs was climbing a different ladder. A career infantry officer, he believed in visible rank-based authority. The chain of command was scripture. In his view, specialized fields like K9 were support elements, valuable, but subordinate to the infantry's clear hierarchy. He'd never seen a dog disobey a direct order to protect a lower-ranking soldier. The concept wouldn't compute. Vance and Rex deployed 3 times. In Afghanistan, Rex detected a complex ambush set up minutes before their patrol walked into it. He was injured by shrapnel in the ensuing firefight. Vance carried her 80-pound partner 2 kilometers to the medevac point, refusing to leave him. That act, seen as sentimental by some old-school Marines, cemented her legendary status among every handler in the theater. The dogs in nearby units seemed to know. Handlers reported their own partners being agitated until news came that Rex would live. After Afghanistan, Vance was assigned to Camp Lejeune as a lead trainer. She was responsible for certifying new handler dog teams. This is where the system reveals its quiet truth. The official rank on her uniform said sergeant, but within the closed world of the kennels, her word was law. Young handlers, male and female, called her ma'am out of pure respect. She was the one they went to when a dog was struggling, when a scent pattern wasn't making sense, when the bond just wouldn't click. Colonel Briggs took command of the base's Consolidated Training Battalion 6 months before the incident. He was a firm believer in by-the-book uniformity. He noticed the K9 unit often operated with what he perceived as excessive independence. Their training schedules sometimes superseded larger formation drills. Handlers like Vance would respectfully cite operational protocols for dog maintenance and readiness. To Briggs, it sounded like excuse-making. The stage was set. You had a handler whose authority was written in the silent language of gestures and trust, earned in life and death situations. And you had a commander whose authority was etched on his collar, enforced by tradition and regulation. They existed in parallel, barely intersecting, until one routine Tuesday morning formation. Briggs had ordered a full battalion muster to address discipline he felt was slipping. Every Marine from every support company was to be on the parade ground at 0600. This included the K9 handlers. Normally, handlers on dog duty rotation were exempt from large formations. Their dogs required specific morning routines, but Briggs's order was absolute. Sergeant Vance was on the morning kennel detail. She had 4 dogs to feed, water, and health check before the day's training began. She received the formation order with 90 minutes notice. Following protocol, she contacted her staff sergeant, requesting an exemption. The request was denied at the company level. The colonel's order was to be followed without exception. So Vance made a decision. She would bring her current primary trainee, a young Malinois named Miko, with her to the formation. It was unorthodox but permissible if the dog was leashed and under control. Miko was still in the final stages of certification. Vance saw the formation as a potential training opportunity, exposure to large crowds and noise. She checked with the kennel master. He shrugged and said, "It's your call, Sergeant, but if the old man asks, it was your call." At 0550, Vance marched onto the parade ground, Miko heeling perfectly at her left side. She fell in with her company. Hundreds of Marines stood at parade rest. The dogs from the other handlers present were in a separate designated row behind the formation, held by junior kennel attendants. Miko was the only dog in the actual Marine formation. Colonel Briggs began his inspection at 0610. He moved down the ranks, his eyes missing nothing: a scuff on a boot, a non-regulation hair length. His gaze was a weapon. He approached Vance's company. His eyes scanned the line, landed on her, then dropped to Miko. He stopped. Complete silence, broken only by the rustle of the morning wind. "Sergeant," he said, his voice cold and clear, "why is there a dog in my formation?" Vance stared straight ahead, following protocol. "Sir, this is military working dog Miko. I am his handler, Sergeant Vance. I was on morning kennel duty and—" "I didn't ask for his biography," Briggs cut her off. "I asked why he is in my formation. This is a Marine formation, not a petting zoo." A slight ripple went through nearby Marines. Vance's jaw tightened. "Sir, with respect, MWD Miko is a Marine. He is government property and a certified patrol and explosive detection dog. His presence is inappropriate," Briggs stated, his voice rising so the entire front of the formation could hear. "This is a disciplined formation. Your dog is a distraction." He took a step closer, looking down at her. The power dynamic was physical, intentional. "You step out of the line." Vance didn't move. "Sir." "You heard me, Sergeant. Step away from the formation." "Your credentials," he said, glancing at Miko with undisguised disdain, "are not required here." And that's when it happened. As Vance, her face a mask of stone, began to take the single step backward out of the line, Miko let out that low, vibrating growl. It wasn't loud, but in the silent tension, it was a thunderclap. Briggs's head snapped toward the dog. "Control your animal, Sergeant." But before Vance could give a command, a whine echoed from the dog line 50 yards away. A German shepherd named Zeus, held by a kennel attendant, lunged against his leash. Then another dog barked, not a random bark, a sharp, alert bark. The kennel attendants, confused, tried to quiet their charges, but it was like trying to hold back the tide. A Belgian Malinois named Ava slipped her collar. She didn't run away. She trotted directly across the open parade ground, straight for Sergeant Vance, and sat defiantly at her feet, facing Colonel Briggs. For 3 seconds there was pure stunned silence, then chaos. Another dog broke free, then another, not all at once but in a swift, deliberate cascade. Within 20 seconds it was over. Every single one of the 12 military working dogs present had broken from their handlers or attendants. They formed a loose, living semicircle around Sergeant Vance and Miko. Some sat, some stood, all were alert, their attention fixed on the colonel. The message was not aggression, it was protection. A unanimous, wordless verdict. The entire battalion of Marines stood frozen, watching the impossible. A colonel had been disobeyed, but not by a Marine, by every canine Marine on the field. Briggs's face flushed deep red. His authority, the very thing he was there to reinforce, had just been publicly and spectacularly overruled by a pack of dogs. He turned his burning gaze from the dogs back to Vance. She stood rigid, looking not at him, but straight ahead, as if still in formation. The only sign of her shock was the slightest tremble in her hand, still resting on Miko's harness. Briggs leaned in, his voice a low, furious growl meant only for her. "Sergeant Vance, you will report to my office at 1300 hours, and you will explain to me what kind of circus trick you just pulled." He turned on his heel and marched away, leaving a formation in disarray and a question hanging in the morning air that would shatter his understanding of command. What do you do when your entire military working dog corps just mutinied and chose a sergeant over a colonel? The walk from the parade ground to the colonel's office was the longest of Elise Vance's career. Word of what the Marines were calling the Canine Mutiny spread through Camp Lejeune faster than a grass fire. By noon, every Marine on base had a version of the story. By 1300 hours, Colonel Briggs's office was a pressure cooker. He didn't offer her a seat. He stood behind his desk, his posture rigid. "Start talking, Sergeant, and it better be good." What was that? Some kind of trained disobedience? A protest? Vance stood at attention. "No, sir, it was not trained. I did not command those dogs to break formation." "Then explain it," he demanded, slapping a hand on his desk. "Dogs do not spontaneously coordinate a mass break from control to protect a single sergeant. That's not animal behavior. That's insubordination orchestrated by a handler." "With respect, sir," Vance said, her voice steady, "that's exactly what it is. But the orchestration wasn't a command I gave this morning. It was built over 7 years. Those dogs didn't break formation for Sergeant Vance. They broke formation for the asterisk handler." Briggs stared at her, uncomprehending. "What does that even mean?" "It means, sir, that in the MWD community, reputation is currency. It's not about rank. It's about proven competence under fire, about how you treat the dogs, about how many times your actions have saved human and canine lives. The dogs sense it. More importantly, the other handlers communicate it. Their dogs pick up on that respect." She took a breath, choosing her words with the precision of a bomb technician. "When you ordered me to step away and dismissed my credentials, you weren't just insulting me. In the dog's perception, you were threatening a high-status member of their pack, a member whose scent, whose posture, whose very presence is associated with safety, food, and leadership by every dog on this base because of how the handlers talk to and about me." Briggs scoffed. "You're telling me dogs gossip?" "I'm telling you, sir, that military working dogs are the most observant creatures on any base. They read micro-expressions, chemical changes in sweat, heart rate, and tone of voice far better than we do. They saw your aggression. They saw my subordinate posture. They saw a threat to a pack leader. Their response wasn't disobedience to you. It was loyalty to the unit's survival hierarchy." He was silent for a full 30 seconds, processing. His military mind fought against the concept. Chain of command was clear, human, written. What she described was primal, fluid, animal. "I want names," he finally said. "The names of every handler who you claim has been spreading this legend about you. I will have them in here to confirm or deny your story." "Sir, that will destroy unit cohesion." "It will." "Those are my orders, Sergeant. You will provide me a list before you leave this office." Dismissed. Vance left, the order hanging over her like a sword, but she never got the chance to provide that list, because Colonel Briggs decided to go around her. He had his adjutant pull the service records of every K9 handler on base, and he started calling them in, one by one, beginning with the most junior. Private First Class Liam Choi was 19, fresh out of a IT. He sat nervously in the same chair Vance had been denied. Briggs skipped the pleasantries. "Private, you witnessed the incident this morning. Explain to me why the dogs broke formation." Choi swallowed. "Sir, the dogs, they respect Sergeant Vance, sir." "Respect? They're animals, Private." "Yes, sir, but they know things. My dog, Cassius, he's stubborn, wouldn't track in the rain. Sergeant Vance spent 3 hours with us in the mud, not yelling, just showing. Cassius works in the rain now. She didn't just train my dog, sir, she trained me. Everyone knows that. The dogs, they know we trust her, so they trust her too." Briggs dismissed him, more confused than before. Next was Corporal Jess Rivera, a handler with 4 years. Her answer was more direct. Sir Sergeant Vance pulled my last partner, Dex, off a live wire during a training exercise at Fort Leonard Wood. The electricity was arcing. She didn't hesitate. Dex lived because of her. If her dog or any dog signals she's in trouble, the entire kennel would mobilize. It's not a trick. It's the law of the pack. One by one, the story solidified. Not a conspiracy, but a consensus. Each handler spoke of Vance not with the bland respect due a superior, but with a reverence usually reserved for heroes. They spoke of deployments she'd been on, of tricks she'd invented for scent differentiation, of the time she diagnosed a dog's thyroid issue that 3 base vets had missed. The critical interview was with Master Sergeant Ben Carter, the grizzled, 20-year veteran who ran the Lejeune MWD program. He walked into Briggs's office and stood at parade rest, his face unreadable. "Master Sergeant, cut the formalities. Sit, I need the truth." Carter sat, his eyes level. "The truth about what, sir?" "The truth is my entire dog corps abandoned their posts today for a sergeant. That's a catastrophic failure of training in your view. In mine, it's the system working as designed." "Explain," Briggs said, his frustration mounting. "Sir, the one dog, one handler policy creates the strongest bond in the military. Stronger than fire teams, stronger than squads. It's a marriage. But within the handler community, there are elders, people whose judgment we trust with our partners' lives. Sergeant Vance is one of those. What you saw today wasn't the dogs choosing her over you. It was the dogs reflecting the absolute trust that every one of my handlers has in her judgment. You challenged that judgment publicly. The dogs ratified ours." Briggs leaned back, a cold realization dawning. "So you're telling me I wasn't just confronting one sergeant, I was confronting the collective will of your entire specialty." "In a manner of speaking, yes, sir." "And how do I command that? How do I issue an order to a unit whose primary loyalty is to an internal hierarchy I'm not part of?" Master Sergeant Carter didn't blink. "You don't, sir. You trust the hierarchy, you leverage it. Sergeant Vance isn't undermining your authority. She's the key to it within our world. You want the K9 unit to perform, you go through her. That's how it's always worked. You just never had to see it before." This was the pivot, the reframing of the entire incident. Briggs had thought it was a breakdown. Carter was telling him it was the system's ultimate expression. The colonel was a man who dealt in charts, ranks, and clear lines. He was being asked to accept an invisible network of influence. He needed proof, tangible, observable proof. He summoned Vance back to his office that afternoon with Master Sergeant Carter present. "Sergeant Vance, Master Sergeant Carter has offered a theory. I want it tested. Tomorrow morning on the training field, I want to see this connection. I want a demonstration, not with your dog, with a dog you've never worked with. If this is real, show me." Vance exchanged a look with Carter, who gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes, sir. What parameters?" "Simple. I will select a dog at random from the kennel. You will have no prior contact. You will then perform a standard obedience and detection drill. If the dog performs for you at or above its certified level, I will consider that data point 1. "And if it doesn't, sir?" Vance asked. "Then we have a very different conversation about the events of this morning and appropriate disciplinary action." Dismissed. The news that the colonel had ordered a trial by dog rocketed through the base. By the next morning, a crowd of off-duty Marines, handlers, and curious staff had gathered at the edge of the training field. The atmosphere was tense, circus-like. Colonel Briggs arrived, accompanied by 2 of his senior officers. Master Sergeant Carter stood by the kennel van. Briggs pointed to a closed transport crate. "That one, open it." Carter opened the crate. Out stepped Thor, a 90-pound German shepherd with a reputation for being willful and handler-sensitive. He was currently paired with a handler on leave. Thor looked around, assessing the crowd, his posture alert but neutral. "Sergeant Vance," Briggs said, "you have 30 minutes to acquaint yourself. Then we begin the drill." Vance didn't approach Thor directly. She first walked to Master Sergeant Carter and spoke quietly. "What's his drive?" Ball, food, praise. Food, chicken, but he's nervy, doesn't like fast movements from strangers. Vance nodded. She took a piece of raw chicken from the training pouch Carter offered, then turned. Instead of walking toward Thor, she sat down on the ground, 10 feet away, facing sideways. She placed the chicken on the grass between them and looked away, completely non-threatening. For a full minute, nothing happened. The crowd fidgeted. Briggs checked his watch. Then Thor's nose twitched. He took a step, then another. He slowly approached, circled, and gently took the chicken. He didn't retreat. He sat down, facing the same direction as Vance, and ate it. Vance still didn't look at him. She spoke in a calm, low murmur. "Good man, easy now." After another minute, she slowly stood up. Thor stood with her. She began to walk a slow, wide circle. Thor heeled at her side, perfectly positioned, without a leash or a command. A murmur went through the handlers in the crowd. They knew what they were seeing. This wasn't just obedience. This was the beginning of rapport, established in minutes instead of weeks. Briggs ordered the drill to begin. It was a basic patrol obedience course: heel, sit, stay, recall, followed by a simple hidden explosives detection problem. Vance worked silently, using minimal hand signals and no raised voice. Thor followed every cue. During the detection portion, he worked the scent cones methodically and sat firmly at the correct locker, indicating the hidden training aid. He performed flawlessly, not just adequately, with a focus he reportedly rarely showed for anyone but his primary handler. When the drill ended, Briggs was quiet. The data point was incontrovertible. "Again," he said, "another dog." They ran the test 3 more times, with a young, hyperactive Malinois, with an older, slower Labrador Retriever used for drug detection. Each time, Vance's method was different, adjusting to the dog's personality, but the result was the same: rapid trust, flawless execution. The crowd's mood had shifted from skepticism to awe. Briggs was no longer just testing a theory. He was witnessing a phenomenon documented only in anecdotal handler lore. The mythical dog whisperer was real, and she was a sergeant he'd tried to dismiss. After the final demonstration, Briggs called Vance over. The earlier anger was gone, replaced by a weary, professional curiosity. "How, and don't give me the pack hierarchy speech. Technically, how did you do that?" Vance, sweaty and covered in dog hair, finally gave him the technical answer. "Sir, it's about pressure and release. All dogs, especially MWDs, are trained to seek calm leadership. They read tension. You were tension this morning. I was trying to be neutral. But when you confronted me, my heart rate spiked, my scent changed. The dog smelled a leader in distress. My technique here is to project absolute calm, to make myself the safest, most predictable thing in their environment. Once they believe that, they'll work for you. It's not magic. It's applied ethology, reading the dog and controlling every signal your own body sends." Briggs finally understood. It was a language, and she was fluent. He'd been shouting in English while she and the dogs conversed in something deeper. His command authority was meaningless in that dialogue. "Return to your duties, Sergeant," he said, his voice flat. "This matter is noted." But as Vance walked away, Briggs knew it wasn't over. The incident was now a command crisis. He had been publicly disobeyed. His solution couldn't be to simply admit a sergeant was right. The institutional stakes were too high. The very precedent would unravel discipline, or so his traditional mind screamed. Yet the evidence was there. The testimony, the demonstration. To punish Vance would be to punish excellence and alienate his entire K9 Corps, a vital combat asset. To ignore it would make him look weak. He needed a third option, and that night, he found it buried deep in Vance's own service record, in a citation he'd previously glossed over. It was an after-action report from Afghanistan detailing the IED ambush she and Rex had detected. The report praised her initiative. But a footnote, added by a visiting Special Operations Forces evaluator, contained a single, cryptic line: "Handler demonstrates preternatural situational awareness and cross-species communication indicators consistent with elite-tier capability. Recommend for advanced SFK9 screening if ever available." Special Forces. The words hit Briggs like a lightning bolt. A new, dangerous path opened up. He couldn't control her influence within the conventional MWD world, but he could potentially transfer it and her out of his command entirely. It was the perfect institutional solution. Make her someone else's problem, and in doing so, remove the living challenge to his authority from his daily view. The next morning, he placed a call to an old friend at United States Army Special Operations Command. He framed it as a recommendation of exceptional talent, but his real mission was a strategic retreat, disguised as a promotion. He set in motion a process that would take Sergeant Elise Vance from the world she knew and throw her into an even more secretive and demanding one, where the bonds she understood would be tested against the most extreme missions on Earth. He thought he was solving his problem. He had no idea he was handing a master key to a lock the Special Operations community had been trying to pick for a decade. The transfer orders landed on Sergeant Vance's file like a verdict. Temporary duty assignment to the United States Army Special Operations Command, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Duration, indefinite. Objective, advanced capability assessment. For Colonel Briggs, it was a neat, bureaucratic solution. For Vance, it was an earthquake. Master Sergeant Carter found her packing her footlocker in the barracks. "This is because of the formation," he stated, not asked. Vance nodded, folding a shirt with precise, angry motions. "They're calling it a talent management opportunity, a recommendation based on demonstrated exceptional skill." Carter snorted. "He's punting you. He can't handle what you represent, so he's shipping you to the land of quiet professionals where, in his mind, you'll either disappear or fail. Either way, his problem is gone." "What do I do, Master Sergeant?" The question was stripped of all military bearing, just the raw uncertainty of a soldier being exiled from her tribe. "You go," Carter said, his voice gruff. "You show them what a Marine Corps handler can do, and you remember, every dog on this base chose you. That doesn't expire because of a change of address." The news of her transfer sent a shockwave through the Lejeune kennels. The handlers were furious. This was their elder, their keystone, being removed for the crime of being too good. The dogs felt the shift in energy. Reports came in of decreased appetite, listlessness in animals that had been vibrant days before. The unit's morale, an intangible but critical asset, plummeted. Briggs had solved his ego problem by creating a readiness problem. He'd traded a public relations headache for a silent, corrosive rot. Vance arrived at Fort Bragg 2 weeks later. The world of Special Operations K9, or SOK9, was a different universe. The handlers here worked with Tier 1 units, Delta Force, Navy SEAL teams, Army Rangers. The missions were classified, the margins for error zero. The dogs were not just detectors, they were assault partners, silent takedown artists, and specialized scouts. Her assessor was a wiry, intense man introduced only as Mike. He had no rank displayed. His eyes held the flat, assessing look of someone who'd seen too much. "Sergeant Vance, we read Colonel Briggs's referral, and between us, we read between the lines. He thinks you're a discipline problem wrapped in a neat skill set. We think you might be something else. Prove us right." The assessment was brutal. It wasn't about basic obedience. It was about operating under simulated gunfire, navigating complex obstacle courses in pitch black, differentiating between 8 nearly identical explosive compounds while exhausted, and reading a dog's subtle stress signals to predict its failure point before the dog itself knew. Vance, drawing on every ounce of her experience, passed. Not just passed. She set new benchmarks in canine communication efficiency. But here, where the story twists, the SOK9 unit didn't see her as a finished product. They saw a raw, unparalleled natural talent operating on instinct and empathy. They saw someone who spoke dog as a first language but had never been taught the Special Operations dialect, the language of direct action, hostage rescue, and high-value target interdiction. Mike called her in after the final assessment. "Your connection with the animals is preternatural. We've never quantified it, but you have it. What you don't have is the tactical framework to apply it to our type of problem. We want to train you. A full SOK9 operator course. It's 18 months. It will break you, and then we'll rebuild you. If you agree, you'll be reassigned permanently." This was the wait, it gets worse moment for Colonel Briggs's plan. He hadn't gotten rid of a problem. He delivered a diamond in the rough, to the most elite dog unit on the planet, and they were eager to cut it. Vance agreed. The course was a descent into a new kind of hell. It was neuroscience, advanced scent theory, combat medicine for dogs, parachute insertion with a canine partner, and small unit tactical design where the dog was a team member, not a tool. She was the only female in her cohort and the only conventional military transfer. The pressure was immense. Meanwhile, back at Camp Lejeune, the consequences of her absence solidified. A scheduled joint readiness exercise involving the K9 unit was a mess. Dogs that had performed flawlessly under Vance's indirect supervision were distracted, slow. A detection error during the exercise led to a simulated casualty. The after-action report cited a degradation in handler confidence and animal focus, linked to the recent disruption in unit leadership continuity. Colonel Briggs was called before his commanding general. The general slid the report across his desk. "Dick, what's going on with your K9 Corps? Their readiness scores have fallen off a cliff." Briggs, defensive, blamed adjustment periods and over-reliance on a single individual. The general, a shrewd man who'd commanded special operations forces in the past, leaned back. "I got a call from an old friend at USASOC. They have that individual, Sergeant Vance. They're raving about her. They say she's revolutionizing some of their approach protocols. You presented her as a problem. They're treating her as a solution. Which is it?" The floor fell out from under Briggs. His attempt to excel a problem had backed spectacularly. Not only was Vance excelling, but her success was now highlighting his failure in stark relief. The general's message was clear. You misdiagnosed a strategic asset as a tactical liability. Strung and scrambling to salvage the situation, Briggs made a fateful decision. He would re-engage. He would bring Vance back, but on his terms. He would co-opt her success. He drafted a memo proposing the creation of a Camp Lejeune Advanced K9 training cell to be led by Sergeant Vance upon her return, leveraging her new special operations knowledge for the benefit of the conventional forces. It was a brilliant bureaucratic save, turning his former problem into his flagship program. He sent the proposal to Fort Bragg, copying Vance. He expected gratitude, a reconciliation, a restoration of the proper order with him as the visionary patron. The response was not from Vance. It was from a USASOC colonel. It was cordial, professional, and an atomic bomb. It thanked Colonel Briggs for his initial recommendation of Sergeant Vance, confirmed her exceptional performance, and stated that upon completion of her course, Sergeant Vance would be retained by USASOC under a permanent transfer. Her skills, the letter stated, were deemed critically irreplaceable to national security missions and would be fully utilized within the Special Operations Command. The request to return her to Camp Lejeune was not compatible with current strategic priorities. Briggs had been outmaneuvered by the very system he'd tried to use. He had lost his asset permanently, and worse, the refusal was now documented. The story was no longer about a formation incident. It was about a conventional commander losing a once-in-a-generation talent to the special operations community because he failed to understand her value. The news reached the Lejeune handlers. Their reaction was not sadness, but a fierce, proud vindication. Of course she was irreplaceable. Of course the top tier wanted her. The dogs had tried to tell them. The legend of Sergeant Vance, the handler chosen by the pack, was now sealed in the unlikeliest of ways by her loss. But this is where the second-order consequences detonate. Vance, immersed in her SOK-9 training, was unaware of the bureaucratic war over her future. She was facing her own crisis. The final phase of the course was a live force, no-notice exercise, a hostage rescue scenario in a sprawling, multi-story urban simulation facility. Her role was to work with a dog she'd trained with for only 4 weeks, a Malinois named Kato, to clear a room believed to contain a hostage and one hostile. Intelligence was intentionally vague. She and Kato made entry. The room was dark, cluttered. Kato's alert was immediate and firm, explosive material nearby, but his body language was wrong. It wasn't the focused alert for a static device. It was agitation, confusion. He looked at Vance, whined softly, and glanced at a ventilation duct, then back at her. The assessing instructor, watching through cameras, expected her to call the alert and withdraw, following the standard protocol for a confirmed explosive hazard. That was the textbook solution. That was what would pass the test. Vance didn't do that. She trusted the dog more than the textbook. Kato wasn't smelling an asterisk bomb. He was smelling the asterisk components of a bomb, separated, and his glance at the duct, she made a split-second decision. She gave a hand signal. Kato silently leapt onto a desk, then onto a filing cabinet, and stuck his nose into the vent. He let out a single, quiet asterisk ruff, not an alert bark, a communication. Vance spoke into her radio, her voice calm, room clear, explosive components identified in the ventilation system, hostile likely intended to assemble on site, no immediate threat, hostage is not in this room, the hostage is being held one floor up, the scent is being drawn through the vent. The observation room went silent, then furious whispering. The scenario was designed exactly as she described, a clever trick to test handler trust in the dog over assumed intelligence. No student had ever cracked it in the 10 years they'd been running the exercise. Most called the explosive alert and retreated. A few pressed on and simulated triggering the fake hostage's execution. Vance had read the dog's nuanced signal and deduced the entire scenario. Mike found her after the debrief. His stern expression had cracked into something like awe. "How," he asked, "did you know?" "Kato told me," she said simply. "He didn't smell danger here. He smelled puzzle here. I just listened." That exercise became a legend at Fort Bragg. It proved that Vance's gift wasn't just about control, it was about interpretation asterisk. She could translate a dog's sensory overload into actionable tactical intelligence. This was the holy grail SOK9 had been chasing. Her final graduation was a small, classified ceremony. At the end, she was presented with a new set of credentials and a badge bearing an emblem she'd never seen, a silhouetted dog and handler superimposed on a downward-pointing dagger. She was now part of an unnamed unit, her missions beyond secret. She was given 30 days leave. She went home not to Camp Lejeune but to her parents' house in Ohio. For the first time in years, she slept through the night, but the peace was fragile. She checked her email. There was a message from Master Sergeant Carter. It was just a photo. It showed the Lejeune kennel, the handlers, and all the dogs sitting in a giant group. They were all looking at the camera. Someone had photoshopped a picture of Vance's face onto a nearby pole. The subject line read, "Still the boss." She smiled, then felt a deep pang of loss. She had ascended to the pinnacle of her field, but at the cost of the pack she loved. On her last week of leave, her phone rang, a blocked number. It was Mike. His voice was tense, stripped of all professional courtesy. "Vance, it's Kato. Something's wrong. We can't figure it out. He's refusing to work. He's just shutting down. The vets say it's not physical. We've tried everything. He's going to be washed out. I know you're on leave, but he asks for you." "He asks for me." "Metaphorically, he just lies by the door you used to enter the kennel. He won't eat unless he's taken there. We think he's broken the bond with us. He imprinted on you during the course. The one dog, one handler policy, we broke it by assigning him to you temporarily, and now he's decided you're his handler, and you're gone." Vance felt a cold dread. In her climb, she'd unknowingly replicated the very trauma the policy was designed to prevent. She had bonded with a dog she had no right to keep, and now its career, its purpose, was being destroyed. "I'm on my way," she said. She drove through the night to Fort Bragg. When she entered the specialized kennel, Kato, who had been listless in his run, erupted, not in aggression, but in a frantic, joyful cacophony of barks and spins. He scrambled against the gate. When she opened it, he didn't jump on her. He pressed his head against her leg and let out a deep, shuddering sigh, the tension visibly drained from his body. Mike and the other handlers watched, their faces a mixture of relief and despair. The evidence was incontrovertible. The bond was absolute, and it presented an impossible choice for the unit: break the dog permanently or break their own personnel assignments to give Kato to Vance. But the unit's commander saw a third option. He called Vance into his office. "Sergeant Vance, Kato is one of the most promising dogs we've bred in a decade. His detection rates are off the charts, but he's useless without you. You have a permanent assignment here. The solution is simple. We make it official. Kato is now your permanent partner." Vance's heart leapt, but then the commander continued. "However, your first mission with him is in 72 hours. It's a real-world deployment, high risk. You'll be attached to a SEAL team for a sensitive site exploitation in a non-permissive environment. Your job is to clear the building of explosives and personnel before the team enters. This isn't an exercise. This is the real thing. Are you ready?" Transition was complete. The journey that started with a public humiliation on a parade ground had led here, to a secret hangar, a waiting aircraft, and a dog whose life was now intertwined with hers in the most dangerous way imaginable. The Packet Legion had chosen her. The Special Operations community had chosen her. Now a single dog had chosen her, and that choice was pulling her toward the edge of the world. She looked at Kato, sitting calmly by her gear, watching her with total focus. The message in his eyes was clear: "Where you go, I go." She turned back to the commander. "We are ready." The target was a fortified compound in the Syrian desert, used as a waypoint for high-value insurgent movement. Intelligence suggested it was both a meeting house and a bomb factory. The SEAL team's job was to capture or eliminate the targets inside. Vance and Kato's job was to make sure the team didn't walk into a building rigged to blow. They inserted under night cover, a silent descent from a helicopter 5 miles out. The 6-man SEAL element moved with practiced ghostliness. Vance and Kato were in the middle of the formation. The team leader, a lieutenant called Ghost, had been skeptical. A dog on a direct action mission was a variable, but his orders were clear: the dog team leads the entry. They reached the compound's outer wall. Vance gave Kato the command to search. The Malinois worked silently, nose to the ground, tracing the perimeter. 10 feet from the main gate he sat, a firm, silent alert. Vance gestured. The team's breacher scanned the indicated spot with a handheld device. Nothing. He looked at Ghost, shaking his head. Vance moved forward. She examined the ground. It was hard-packed dirt. She pointed to a nearly invisible seam. It wasn't a pressure plate. It was a primitive but effective tilt wire, buried an inch down, connected to a mortar round rigged as a mine. The electronic sniffer wouldn't detect it because it had no metallic signature until the wire was pulled. Kato had smelled the explosive filler of the mortar. He had just saved the team's approach. Ghost looked from the hidden wire to Vance, his skepticism replaced by a nod of professional respect. They bypassed the gate, went over the wall. The courtyard was clear. The main building was a 2-story concrete box. Vance signaled Kato to clear the exterior. The dog alerted again at a basement window sealed with rebar. Chemical precursor scent. The bomb factory was below. The plan changed instantly. They couldn't assault the main floor without knowing if the basement was full of volatile chemicals. Ghost made a decision. "You and the dog clear the basement first. Find a safe route up. We'll hold here." Vance and Kato slipped through the window. The basement was a labyrinth of storage rooms, reeking of ammonia and fuel. Kato moved like a shadow, his nose constantly sampling the air. He would pause, indicate a room where components were stored, then move on. He was building a map in his mind, and through him, Vance could see it too. He led her to a stone staircase in the back, the only clear path not littered with chemical drums. At the top of the stairs was a heavy wooden door. Vance listened, muffled voices in Arabic, at least 2, maybe 3. She looked at Kato, pointed to the door, then made a closed fist, the signal for personnel. Kato's ears pricked. He gave a single, slow tail wag, confirmation. She keyed her radio, whispering, "Basement clear of immediate explosive hazards. Staircase secure. At least 2 hostiles on the other side of the door at ground level. Proceeding." Ghost's voice came back, "Acknowledged, on your mark." Vance took a breath, readied her weapon, and slowly turned the handle. The door was not locked. It opened inward, revealing a small, dimly lit kitchen area. 2 men sat at a table, cleaning weapons. A third was by a stove. Kato didn't wait for a command. He understood the geometry of the room from the scent picture. He slipped through the door the moment it was ajar enough, a black blur low to the ground. He went straight for the man farthest from the door, the greatest threat. He didn't attack. He slammed his body into the man's legs, a precise, hard bump that knocked the man off balance onto the floor, his rifle clattering away. The move was silent, shocking, and perfectly calculated to neutralize without a fatal bite. The other two men spun, grabbing for their weapons. Vance was already in the room. "Down, get down," she shouted in Arabic. The man by the stove froze. The one on the floor was pinned under 90 pounds of focused Malinois, Kato's muzzle inches from his face, a low, continuous growl vibrating through the room. The second man at the table made a decision. He raised his pistol. Vance's shot was a single, suppressed crack. The man dropped. The remaining man by the stove threw his hands up. The SEAL team flooded in from the courtyard, securing the room, the house, and the now surrendering insurgents. The mission was a success. High-value targets captured, bomb factory identified, 0 friendly casualties. Ghost found Vance in the kitchen, giving Kato a piece of kibble from her pouch. "Hell of a dog," he said. "He is," Vance replied, not looking up. "No," Ghost said. "Hell of a asterisk team asterisk." The after-action report was classified, but the results echoed through the special operations community. The Vance Kato team had proven its worth in the most definitive way possible. The investment was validated. They were placed on high-priority rotation. Back in the world, the consequences of that parade ground incident finally came full circle. Colonel Briggs, his proposed training cell dead without its centerpiece, was reassigned. It was not a promotion. He was given a staff position at the Pentagon, a clear sign his command days were over. The official reason was broadening experience. Everyone who knew the story understood the truth. Before he left Camp Lejeune, he requested a final tour of the kennels. Master Sergeant Carter escorted him. The dogs were in their runs. They watched him pass with the same alert, assessing calm they'd shown on the parade ground. There was no aggression, no growls, just observation. Briggs stopped in front of a run holding a Belgian Malinois. It was Miko, the dog Vance had brought to formation. "He remembers you, sir," Carter said quietly. Briggs looked at the dog. "Does he blame me?" Carter almost smiled. "Dogs don't do blame, Colonel. They just remember. He remembers you caused his pack leader distress. He remembers the others coming to help. It's just data to him, a fact about the world." Briggs nodded, a profound weariness in his posture. "And the data says I was wrong." "The data says," Carter agreed gently, "that there was more going on than you were equipped to see, sir." It was the closest Briggs would ever get to an apology from the pack. He left the kennels and Camp Lejeune for good. For Sergeant Elise Vance, now a critical asset in a shadow war, there was no such closure. There was only the next mission and the next. Her life became a cycle of training, deployment, and decompression with Kato. The bond between them deepened into something beyond partnership. They could communicate with glances, with slight shifts in posture. In a sterile office at USASOC, a psychologist reviewing her file termed it cross-species operational symbiosis. In the kennel, the other handlers just called it magic. A year after the Syria mission, Vance was invited to speak at the graduation of a new SOK-9 handler class. She stood before the 20 students, Kato sitting obediently beside her. She didn't talk about tactics or scent theory. She talked about the moment of choice. "The most important skill you will ever learn," she told them, "is not how to command your dog. It's how to listen to him. He has better senses than any machine we can build. Your job is to be his interpreter. Your authority doesn't come from your rank. It comes from your ability to translate his truth into action. If you do that, you will have a partner who will walk through hell for you, and you must be willing to do the same for him." After the speech, a young female handler approached her, looking nervous. "Sergeant Vance, I was at Camp Lejeune. I was a kennel attendant. I saw what happened that morning on the parade ground." Vance braced for pity or hero worship. She got neither. The handler continued. "After you left, Colonel Briggs tried to change everything. New protocols, more inspections. It was terrible for a while, but then something happened. The senior handlers, they started teaching us your way. The listen first way, it filtered down. The new dogs are better. The handlers are better. What he tried to kill, it just grew stronger. We all tell the story, not as a rebellion, but as a lesson. The dogs chose right." Vance felt a tightness in her chest she hadn't allowed in a long time. The legacy of that embarrassing, painful moment wasn't her own promotion. It was a change in the culture of the very unit she'd left behind. The pack had adapted and evolved. The final, surprising detail came 6 months later. A package arrived at her secure post office box at Fort Bragg. Inside was a small, polished wooden box. There was no note. She opened it. Inside, nestled in foam, was a simple handmade medal. It was a paw print, carved from what looked like dark oak, attached to a green and black ribbon. It was clearly not official. It had the rough, heartfelt look of something made in a base woodshop. She turned it over. On the back, tiny letters were burned into the wood, "To the boss, from the pack." It could only have come from Lejeune, from Master Sergeant Carter, or Corporal Rivera, or Private Choi, or all of them together. It was a recognition that meant more than any formal award. It was proof that her true rank, in the hierarchy that mattered most to her, was still intact. She placed the medal on her desk, where she could see it every day. The story of the female handler and the colonel became a modern fable in certain corners of the military, told as a cautionary tale about underestimating people, told as a testament to the unbreakable bond between handler and dog, told as evidence that real leadership is often recognized first by those who follow you on 4 legs, not 2. For Elise Vance, the journey that began with an order to step away from a formation had led to a life she could never have imagined. She had found her place, not in spite of her unique gift, but because of it. And she had a partner who had chosen her as definitively as any pack ever could. She sits now in a quiet moment between missions, rubbing Kato's ears. He leans into her hand, his eyes closed in contentment. The memory of that cold morning on the parade ground is distant, a faded scar. The colonel's voice is just an echo, but the feeling of a dozen dogs moving to surround her, that moment of pure, instinctive loyalty, is still warm. It was the first time the invisible bond she'd always felt was made visible for everyone to see. It was the day she learned that sometimes the most powerful answer to an order isn't disobedience. It's a deeper, older law asserting itself, and on that day, the law had 4 legs, a wet nose, and absolute certainty. So what does this story of a sergeant and her dogs actually reveal? It shows us that in any rigid system, there are often 2 hierarchies at work. The one written on the organizational chart and the one written in trust, proven in moments of crisis and recognized by those who depend on you most. Colonel Briggs saw a breakdown in discipline. The dogs saw a threat to a leader their entire community had vetted and approved. They were enforcing a standard he couldn't see. The legacy of women like Joyce Sellers, who entered the first MWD class in 1974, is not just about breaking a gender barrier. It's about expanding the very definition of what strength and authority look like in the military. It's proven by the nearly 20% of Army handlers today who are female, and by operators like Sergeant Vance, whose competence is so total it transcends species. This incident forces a question: where else in our world do these silent hierarchies operate? Where is expertise and loyalty being judged by a more ancient, more demanding metric than titles and rank? The answer is probably everywhere: in hospitals, in firehouses, in corporate teams. The true leaders are often the ones the group instinctively circles around when pressure mounts, whether that group walks on 2 legs or 4. For Sergeant Elise Vance and Cato, the work continues in shadows we are not cleared to see. Their bond, that silent language of gestures and trust, is now a national asset, but at its heart, it remains the same simple pact first formed in kennels and on parade grounds. I will listen to you, and you will guide me. We will protect each other. If you are captivated by this story of unspoken respect and the hidden power of loyalty, make sure you subscribe. We uncover the true stories of the underestimated, the quiet professionals, and the moments when the real chain of command reveals itself. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the next story is already waiting. Remember, sometimes the most powerful forces in any room are the ones that never say a word. They just take their position and let their loyalty speak for them.